I'm going to start our session this evening, and we can always admit people as we carry on throughout our session. Welcome, good evening to all of you. My name is Emma May. I'm Director of Operations and I head up the employment team at Work Avenue. You'll have had emails from me in the past, you'll have seen my name. So welcome to all of you who are joining this evening. I'm going to ask my colleague Richard also to introduce himself. He's also on the call with the Work Avenue background behind him too.
Yes, in fact, Emma, there's just one professional not here. You just asked me. It's and Natalie, I think.
Oh, I hope she'll join us soon.
I'm sure she'll join us shortly. Yes, thanks, Emma. My name's Richard and I'm on the employment team with Emma, as she said. I've worked at Work Avenue for about 3.5 years now, probably been an employment advisor about 7 years in total. And the majority of the work I do is one-to-one work with clients with employment and careers advice, and running workshops, and generally getting involved in the employment team with the events and activities that we do. So welcome and hi, nice to meet you all.
I'm not going to ask our professionals to introduce themselves yet, because they will be doing that as part of their little sort of pitch this evening. Welcome to you all. I mean, some of you may be new to Work Avenue, and if you are, you need to know that we're here to help anyone who is looking to find employment at whatever stage of their working life they're at. We work right across all stages of people's working lives, but a really, really important part of that is the work we do with our students, our graduates and our undergraduates, who of course are at the start of your working life. Much has been made this year of the stresses and strains of the year we've all had, and particularly the impact that the year has had, without going into too much detail, we all know it, the impact that has had on people starting out on their working life, and what graduate opportunities are going to look like moving forward. And there's no doubt there are a lot of concerns, a lot of issues about that, which is why one of the reasons why we have scheduled Graduate Careers Month now, a series of networking webinars where people can meet with job families, where professionals from different job families, to interact with people, to find out a little bit, there's Natalie, that's great, to interact with professionals, find out how they got into that field of work, what it was like to start out, how they moved through the career to where they are today, and generally what they think of the career path they've taken. And a little bit about what they think the future is also going to hold for them, where they want their own personal future to be. We particularly like to work with professionals who are probably in the first half of their working life. They've been graduates themselves. They understand only too well what it's like to study, to think about what career path you're going to be taking, the stresses and strains of thinking about that, the pros and cons, what it was like to go through a graduate recruitment process, and actually start, your working life in that way. So that's why these particular professionals are on our call tonight. Sadly, we're missing a couple of people who can't be with us unexpectedly, but we still have representatives, accountants, we have consultants, we have lawyers, and we have an actuary on the call as well. So this is professional services night, if you will. And I'm guessing all of you who have joined our webinar tonight are considering potentially entering one of these professions when you graduate. So again, I'm going to ask each of the professionals a little later on to introduce themselves, tell us a bit about their career path as I've described, who they work for, what they do, why they chose that career pathway, how they got their first role, how their career has developed since then, and how they see their future. After that, when each of the professionals has done just that, we're going to open up to questions from each of you. this is an amazing opportunity for each of you to ask the professionals what they think of their career, warts and all, what's good, what's not so good, what they like, what they don't like about that profession, what they see as the future of the profession, any tips and advice about getting into those jobs. We're just going to have an open forum of questions. So please don't be shy. You can put your questions either on the chat, or alternatively, just raise your hand using the hand raising function on Zoom. Either way, we will find your question. It's really not a problem. And of course, don't leave the Zoom tonight thinking, I wish I'd asked that. This is your opportunity. Ask the question. These guys who we've got on, who are representing the industries tonight have been you. They have been graduates thinking about their career pathway. They know only too well what it feels like to go through that. So they do understand and will be only too happy to take your questions. Okay, I think we should start, unless anyone has got any burning questions for now. If you do, please put them in the chat. Very happy to help. I'm going to start with Daniel Silva. You're one of our accountants. You're an accountant tonight. Daniel, are you there?
Yeah.
Hey, nice to see you. So if you heard the brief, you know the brief. Maybe just take everyone through how you started, how you got into it, what it was like, where you're going from here.
So I started obviously back at uni, did a finance degree, and during uni I got some placements. One of those placements I was based in Southend originally offered me a graduate job. So went back to that firm after, was carried on there for a couple of years. Carried on there, and then I decided, right, I want to move into London. Moved 3.5 years ago to Aram Berlin Gardner ABG, which are based in the city. So it's worked up to qualification.
At that point, were you? Did you move firms as a qualified or as a trainee?
So I moved firms to there as a trainee. Halfway through.
Trainee, okay.
I wasn't getting enough experience being in a smaller firm, and being in London, you get the bigger clients. And then so I was there for 3.5 years, and then 4 months ago I started interviewing again post qualification. So I qualified at the end of 2019, and then started looking again what I want to do now I'm qualified. Because obviously when you do your ACA, it really opens you up to lots and lots of different career paths.
How did you find your study as an ACA?
Studies are very tough, but very hard.
And what was your
once you've done them, the world's your oyster, really.
Daniel, what was your degree in?
Finance.
I mean, I knew that because I've seen, but no one else did. So yeah, your degree was in finance. And do you think that helped you by having a financial background, or do you feel that it's a pathway that is open to anyone regardless? Do you think people who haven't gone through a financy, mathsy background are disadvantaged?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's like learning another language. You've got people that are coming from a history degree, a Spanish degree, anything, and they're coming in and they're doing their ACA, and you learn it from, okay, you might benefit by, if you have a finance degree, you get a few exams you don't have to take. But to be honest, 1 or 2 exams, it doesn't really matter. When there's 15, it doesn't. People come from any background. Okay. So it's a good career path, and I'd say it does open up a lot of different things going forward. So you can, whether you stick in audit, which is where everyone normally starts, or going into industry, working in internal finance. So that's the decision I was making last year. I decided to stay in audit for the time being, mainly because COVID interrupted all of the external or the internal finance jobs. There weren't any going. Audit it's very good because you get a lot of experience in different companies, and you get to audit all different industries. So I'd recommend it.
And your training and experience has been largely in smaller, medium-sized firms, hasn't it?
Firms,
yeah. What's your view about small, medium, or the big four type approach from your perspective? Obviously,
from my perspective, I didn't want to touch the big four. You get what, it's only from what I've heard from other people. Obviously, I don't know myself, but when you're in a big four, when you're in the big four firms, you're not auditing lots of different industries. You're just doing one section of a file, and you're not learning a wider range of things. If you're in a medium-sized firm, you get a lot more responsibility, and you're overseeing the whole business, and you have a lot more to do with that company or that you're working on. So you build better relationships with your clients, in my eyes. Everywhere is different, but having PwC or a big four name on your CV is very good. So
I guess it just depends. And so your plans for the future, stay where you are or move?
Move. So I moved a couple of months ago, but it's not a long-term thing. It was to get a better name. Well, not so necessarily a better name, a better position on my CV, but long-term is intern in the company, working within the finance team. So
yeah, so you want to
decision.
Into industry?
Definitely.
Interesting.
So it's not for everyone, but I think when you've done audit for 5 years, it does get very samey, but you get very good experience from different and seeing how different companies work, different industries.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you very, very much. Okay, moving on. I'm going to move from accountancy to. I'm going to stay in financy. I'm going to go actuarial. Sammy, I think you're on the call. Hi there.
Hi.
Nice to see you. So we have an actuary on the call as well. So we're going deeply sort of numerical here. And finance. Do you want to take us through exactly the same your pathway?
Yeah,
as well?
Sure. So I did a maths degree at Birmingham Uni. And from there, I mean, I'll be honest, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I kind of went into the career very blindly, just because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
In common with many, I would say. I was
probably a little bit more dramatic. I went for the whole med school, then dropped out of med school, and I was a bit more dramatic about it. But so I applied for a couple of places. I technically didn't get a grad scheme. I ended up working for a company called Prudential. Don't know if you've heard of Pru Health or those kind of things. I actually got rejected from the grad scheme, but I don't know why I really wanted to work there. So I kind of just stayed in touch with the HR person who spoke to me, did a bit of emailing, and just basically said, if there's any job that comes up in the future, please let me know. And I was very lucky that a couple of months later, there happened to be a grad scheme job that wasn't strictly in the grad scheme program. So I managed to kind of avoid all the assessment centers. I've never been to one. I was very lucky. I avoided all of that.
You can say you were lucky. I can say that you were tenacious and you made your luck. But you carry on.
Okay, fine. Maybe. And then, yeah, as I say, like I went into it very blind. I remember in my first interview, they asked me to do a presentation of my actuarial work experience, of which I had none. So instead, I gave them a presentation on prime numbers, because that's what I did for my dissertation. I literally had no idea what I was doing. Thankfully, really enjoyed the career. At Prudential, I had a very more like a technical kind of role. So the archetypal actuary sitting at my desk, playing with spreadsheets and numbers and doing all these nerdy kind of things. And I stayed in that company until I qualified. My reasoning being was probably a bit chicken to change, but also as the exams get a bit harder, as you go on in your qualification, the exams get much harder. And I wasn't so excited about the prospect of like doing the big final exams whilst also figuring out a new company and a new job. So yeah, so I stayed there until I qualified. So I was there for about 6 years, and then I moved to my new job about 2.5 years ago, about a year after I qualified, for a company called Legal & General. Still a little bit nerdy, but very different. So kind of like I've gone from a very technical role to, say, a more business commercial kind of role. So I've kind of like just merged actuarial stuff and business and commercial management kind of stuff. So I'm dabbling in new areas. In terms of future, I'll probably stay put for a little bit. I quite enjoy the company, but who knows?
So when I spoke to Daniel and we had a conversation about, does it have to, are you better with a numbers degree, a financial numerical type degree background? Daniel's response was, it really doesn't matter. History, anything goes. What would you say about moving into the actuarial space? I
don't think the same applies for actuaries.
No.
I think if you don't have like a maths, economics, maybe finance kind of degree, I don't know, you might be able to, but I don't know how far you'd kind of get. There's also actuarial specific degrees. I always say, people always ask me if I just do maths all day. The answer I would give them is I don't sit down and do integrals all day, maybe occasionally, but you definitely have to think mathematically. So you're not doing maths, but you think very mathematically. And the exams also require a lot of maths. So you have to have a lot of maths knowledge or ability to be able to pass the exams. So that's probably why they require some sort of numbers related or economics related degree.
Okay. Anything else you want to say at this stage? I'm sure there'll be more questions as we go through. What kind of people do you think are best suited to becoming actuaries?
Well, then they always say that actuaries are people who find accountancy boring because we're the ultimate nebs.
Well, I have heard that said, yes, but I mean, what do I know? I'm neither. So
I'll be honest. I think it's a little bit true, but you
Yeah.
can get normal people to try buck the trend. No, it's. I'll be honest. I think it's a really great career. If you have a little bit of a nerdy side to you, it's a phenomenal career. It gets you thinking. It challenges you. I personally really enjoy it. Like I think it's a great career. I really do.
Brilliant. And apart from insurance companies, where else can you work as an actuary?
I think, I mean, I was similar to Daniel. I didn't personally want the Big Four. My reason being was, I just knew a lot of people in the Big Four who had to travel around the country quite a lot. And I kind of like my own desk with my cookies next to me in my drawer. And I don't really want to be traveling and stuff. But there you can go in-house like I've done, which is work for an insurance company and be their in-house actuary. You can go for consulting, like the Big Four kind of stuff. You can go for, all different types of things. It kind of just depends on what you want. I'm a homeboy, so I quite like being in-house and having my comfort zone. But it depends what everyone wants.
Okay.
There's a lot, as I think Daniel mentioned, there's a lot of pro going to Big Four. You get a lot of experience, you get a lot of exposure. It looks great on a CV. When I was looking to move after my first job, the recruiters were desperate for me to apply. They're like, it's the best thing for your career. You can either be a regulator in-house or a consultant, and you want one of each, and it'll be amazing for your career. But it just wasn't for me personally.
Well, it seems that you've taken a pretty good pathway so far. So follow your own pathway. Very good, very good. Okay, thank you, Sammy. I'm going to move on from actuarial to consultancy. Gideon. Nice to see you. Gideon's been joining our graduate networking events for quite a number of years now, haven't you? One way and another. Obviously, we're doing a bit differently this year, and your career path is already taking you in a number of different directions.
It's ironic because I'm not actually a graduate. It's wonderful to be here again. I think it's probably 6th or 7th year.
I think
it's the third different location as well.
Yes.
No, but it's really lovely to be here. Always kind of happy to help and kind of being part of such positive event. My kind of career has taken me in various different places. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I was going to say, if you want to take it from the beginning about how you, because yes, your pathway started out slightly differently, but it's consultancy, so it'll be very interesting for people to hear how your career has developed since you went into consultancy, and particularly your latest change.
Yeah, with pleasure. So I started my career as an apprentice in HR advisory, particularly around expatriate tax, but kind of very quickly realized that tax wasn't for me, and I was much more interested in a career in consulting. So through my time at EY, where I spent 4.5 years, I really kind of developed working across the spectrum of consulting projects, so ranging from HR advisory, finance, IT advisory, across sector in the public sector, so ranging of police forces and the armed forces, to some government departments, to also some of the leading FS clients and life sciences, get a whole kind of spectrum of experience. What I found was I actually had a real passion for HR, which has kind of led to my latest move into I'm actually day 3 into my new role at Dixon's Carphone, which is effectively supporting their HR leadership with they oversee 30 plus projects, HR and talent initiatives across the organization, and it's helping them drive change and transformation. So that's kind of really exciting. I've worked in consulting for 8 years now, and I think one of the main reasons, I think when people ask me what consulting is about, I see there's very different types of consulting. So you can either specialize in a function, so whether that's HR, IT, finance, or you can specialize in sectors or industries. So could be, do you have a big passion for life sciences or policing or defense or financial services? And that's why actually, I know I've seen the questions come up around, do you have to have a specific interest or background? I'd say absolutely not. There are some people I have colleagues who are teachers, who are former teachers, who have big passion for kind of education, and obviously a big part of consulting is kind of facilitation. So they obviously have a great experience in that respect. Also, I'll have kind of colleagues who have been pharmacists who have specialized in the world of life sciences, finance and FS. So really, there's a whole breadth of the way you kind of want to take your career in consulting. One of the main reasons I evolved from consulting, having worked for like 3 consulting firms, moving into an in-house role, is I think you get the opportunity as a consultant in a consulting firm to work on a breadth of different projects, often range from 2 months to 2 years. There's great advantage to that. You really get good exposure, get to work with some kind of great colleagues. But one of the challenges is you often work where the client is. I know we're living in a very strange world now, but in the world pre-COVID, I'd say 70% of my projects were outside London. So that obviously kind of takes its toll, and also the sense of belonging. You're part of kind of a core project team, which changes every project. So one of the desires of moving in-house is actually you get to kind of work for one organization, help to shape the strategy, and in my case, like the HR and talent agenda, which is kind of something I'm quite interested in.
So there's quite a lot of diverse opportunities one way and another. And of course, consultancy has been your stepping stone, as it were, across into the client side, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely kind of recommend anyone who's kind of interested in project management or particular areas of change or transformation. Certainly kind of, it's definitely a career that if you like problem solving or just thinking creatively, and especially recently, there's a lot more in more innovative ways in the way we interact with our clients. In the last year, virtual whiteboarding, or instead of face-to-face collaboration, try and do this virtually. And there's a lot of exciting space in the consulting area, so definitely kind of one to watch.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you very, very much, Gideon. I'm going to ask, moving to law now, Efrat, another good friend of Work Avenue. Perhaps you could say hello and talk us through your career pathway.
Hi there, thank you for having me. And it's
nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So I had quite a weird entry into law. It was never something I ever really wanted to do. I was always dead set on medicine, actually. So I did all the classic routes into medicine.
You and Sammy together, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, except I didn't get into medical school, so there we are. I ended up doing a biomedical chemistry degree at Warwick. And quickly realised it wasn't for me because all my experiments ended up crashed on the floor because I'm that clumsy. And I guess with that kind of degree, you either do teaching, lab work, or research, that kind of thing, or medicine, and none of those were for me. So didn't really know what to do after university, moved to Israel for a little while, worked in a pharmaceutical company, Teva, in their contracts department, and thought, oh, this is interesting. I could combine my degree with law. So went back home, did the GDL, which is the conversion course. And during that time, I also realized I had no legal work experience. So I started working, just doing literally every internship I could think of. At one point, I was doing 4 or 5 jobs while studying full time. At that point, I was just emailing random firms asking if they would take me on for a week. A lot of them said yes because they wanted the free labour. And then I did the LPC. By that time, I had quite a full legal CV, and I was looking for a training contract. Again, I just emailed a lot of places, sent just applications to everyone you can think of, including Magic Circle, middle-sized firms. Basically, my approach was just to apply to everything and see who would accept me, which probably isn't the best approach, to be honest, because you probably should tailor your CV to that particular firm and spend more time on the application. So maybe not the best approach, but I did end up with a training contract in a small firm in the West End. It's a boutique firm. It was a boutique firm with only three partners. So I did my training there. After I trained, they didn't really specialize in anything because they called themselves general practitioners. And I wanted to specialize. So a year or so later, I moved to Lee & Thompson, where I am now, which is a firm in the West End. I do employment law. And the firm itself is a media, film and TV, music, creative industries type firm. So we get a lot of celebrity clients. So in our department, in the employment department, we deal with a lot of celebrities. So for instance, the Beckhams is a big one. So a lot of their employment and nanny contracts. So yeah, it's really interesting work. I've been there for about 5 years now, with 2 maternity leaves in the middle. And yeah, that's how I came into law.
And what's your, we'll come back to some more questions, but in terms of the future, is, as far as your thinking goes so far, do you intend to stay there for a while, or are you thinking of moving on, or what?
I think with law it's quite difficult because I did consider going in-house for a little while. And actually, instead of coming to Lee & Thompson, I was offered an in-house role. And after one of my maternity leaves, I was offered an in-house role as well. But I decided not to, purely because I quite like private practice, because it's quite varied. As in-house, you're dealing with one client, as in the company that employs you. Yes, you get to know the business very well, but where do you really go from there? As in private practice, you can build your own client base, you've got autonomy, you can work your way up to partner level, have your own client base. And I think that's what I'm more leaning towards at the moment, but I don't really know, to be honest. Things could change. There's people that get to partner level and still go in-house later. So, I mean, at the moment, I'll stay put, but we'll see what happens.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
And last, but very much not least, we have Natalie. If you're there, Natalie.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi, Natalie. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate the time you've given. Same applies to you. Natalie's also a lawyer, but taking a slightly different professional route. So talk us through it, please.
So I think that I always knew I was going to go into law, but I tried to resist unsuccessfully as much as possible. So I was just thinking, when I did my UCAS applications, I think back then it was 5 applications. I had 4 law courses and 1 non-law course, and I ended up doing the non-law course. And I don't think that was like an accident. I think I just was resisting as much as possible. So I studied criminology at the University of Manchester. And when I graduated, it was 2009, so it was I think it was around recession time. There wasn't a huge amount out there, and truthfully, I think I was too lazy and not imaginative to think of anything else. So I decided to go and do the GDL because to me it was just the safest option, and I think that was literally the reason I did it. So I did the GDL and the law conversion in Manchester, and then I was offered a interim job working for the Union of Jewish Students, so I'd always been quite involved with when I was at uni. So I was like, well, great, there's another year where I don't have to think about what I want to do in adults. So I was like, I'll do that. Thank you very much. So I did that for a year. And then again, the year was up and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was like, well, I've done the law conversion, I may as well go and do the legal practice course. So I did my legal practice course. I was starting to take it more seriously, so I was doing work experience. It was mostly arranged. I wasn't doing the vacation schemes. So I did one at a sports law firm in Manchester through a contact. I did UJS's, I've not UJS, UGI have a scheme, I've completely forgotten what it's called, access, no, I can't remember what it's called. So I got to do a trainee a vacation scheme at Mishcon, which was great. But at the end of my LPC, I think I'd probably made applications, but to be honest, I was applying for the wrong types of firm for me. I was applying to the big firms just because that's where the system was, and that was tick box, and it was the easiest thing to do. Again, I was just being really lazy. So I wasn't getting any of those because they weren't the right firms for me and my applications weren't any good. So I think I just spent a year working in sales. And I think by that point I was ready to, well, I wasn't really putting much effort in. And then, very odd story, I ended up getting a training contract out of nowhere. In fact, I got 2 offers. One was a firm somewhere, I've forgotten their names. I wasn't very keen on it, but I was like, well, I should probably just do this to get qualified. But the other firm was a regional firm called Harold Benjamin, which was a big property outfit. So I took the job. Even though I had absolutely no interest in being a property lawyer and had almost failed land law and property law and never paid any attention and just did enough to get through it, I always wanted to be a family lawyer. And about like a month after I joined the firm, they shut their family department. So I was like, oh. So 2 years were up, and I knew I wanted to leave that firm, and the only thing I'd had any training in was property. I didn't know how to do anything else. So again, because I wanted to leave them more than I wanted to wait and find somewhere that would take me in family law, I just took the first job I could get, which ended up being a lovely firm in Regent's Park. Again, it was a property specialist firm, and now I have accepted my fate, and I'm quite happy being a property lawyer. And that is how I ended up where I am, through a mixture of laziness and circumstance.
Well, yes, I mean, I think what I'm hearing is that there's a real trend, you know, sometimes we make our decisions and sometimes the decisions make us, as it were. And, you know, things happen in spite of us, not necessarily because of us as well, to an extent. So property law is where it is for now and where it's going to be in the future. Do you see yourself changing firms again, or are you for now content? What do you see for the future?
I'm at a great firm. I'm very happy where I've ended up. It's a great place, developing loads. It's exactly what you want at my stage.
Brilliant. Thank you all very, very much. I mean, it was really fascinating to hear the 5 journeys that you've all taken tonight. Similarities to all of them, and yet each has been very, very individual, stumbling blocks along the way, opportunities along the way, things that have gone well, things that have not gone well. What I'd like to do now, obviously, is open the floor up to everyone on the call, on the webinar this evening, to you know, ask your questions. This is a really amazing opportunity. It would really, it is a networking thing. You've got a great opportunity to talk to people who really, really know what they're talking about, having been there and still are there. If you're brave enough to put your cameras on and go public, that would be, you know, from a networking perspective, that's a lot better. So I'm going to ask, does anyone have any questions for any of our professionals tonight?
Yeah, I've got a question. For both Ephra and Natalie. I was wondering, like, how the work you've been involved in has like changed over like the past 5-10 years. So like to do with like, well, COVID recently, and also in terms of like artificial intelligence and stuff like that, with like documents and dealing with like automation and stuff like that. So yeah. So
our 2 lawyers, Ephrat, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. I mean, when I first started training, I don't know if it was just the firm I was at, probably was, but the tech systems there were awful. They didn't even have a time recording system. We had to do it manually. So looking at where we are now in terms of legal tech, it's advanced incredibly. And because I'm in employment law, I'm sure Natalie has also felt COVID, but employment law in particular it's actually boosted us, because everyone's furloughed people, everyone needs furlough agreement, people made redundant, who do they turn to? People who have been made redundant, who do they turn to as well? So for us, COVID's been really good.
You almost feel ashamed to say that, don't you?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was actually on maternity leave when COVID all kicked up, and I was a bit annoyed about that, because I thought, oh my gosh, something's really exciting is going on in my industry, which I can't be a part of right now. Yeah, I mean, in terms of remote working as well, our firm has had to put systems in place in order for everyone to work remotely. So legal tech is completely advanced because of COVID, really.
Brilliant, thanks. Natalie?
I actually think the first firm I started at 8 years ago had the best system I've ever worked on. I think firms I've been at subsequently, their systems just aren't anywhere as good, although subsequent to what's gone on in the past year, my firm is currently moving to a case management system, which is obviously very common with law firms. So that should be upgraded very soon, although we've worked perfectly fine remotely. I think if we're talking about how things have changed recently with COVID, I think that property hasn't been as badly affected as everyone thought it was going to be. I personally have had an absolutely brilliant year, best year I've ever had, in so many different ways, not just on billing, but on bringing new clients. At the moment, I'm absolutely slammed. So I remember in March last year, we were thinking, oh God, we're all going to lose our jobs, made redundant, it's going to crash, etc., etc. And like, it's really not been as terrible as we expected. At least that's my experience. I realized that not everyone's been so lucky, including in the legal profession. Like plenty of property lawyers got made redundant. Adelshaw Goddard got rid of loads. I think Flaggate got rid of a fair few, and obviously loads of firms made redundancies, mainly the bigger ones. And I think when things like this happen, it does sort of indicate how much like fat needs to be cut. But that's why I love working at a smaller firm. For that reason as well. Yeah, don't know if that answers the question.
No, I think it does. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone else?
I have a question for Sammy. What are your favourite and least favourite parts about being an actuary?
Favorite part, genuinely, it's a good career. Like I enjoy it. I'm challenged every day. I have to think, and I love that. You know, whatever kind of role, whether you're in pricing, reporting, or like some really technical, like there's a lot of thinking to do, and I like that personally. And I like maths as well. I did warn you I was a nerd. So I like that I'm still using that side of my brain. The worst part was definitely the exams. The exams they're not easy at all. I don't want to sugarcoat it. They can go on for quite a number of years as well.
How many professional exams are there, Sammy?
Oh gosh, 15 maybe, something like that.
Okay, and typically, and what's the average qualification time?
Yes, so they're done less frequently than accountancy exams. So I think accountancy you do like every couple of months, if I'm right. For the actuarial ones, you do it every 6 months, always on syllabus.
Bigger exams.
Yeah, well, I can't comment because I don't know those accountancy ones, but they spread them out a bit more. Also, you know, it's kind of different. You know, failure in the actuarial exams are very common, and you know, in your study support scheme, they give you a number of failures as well. Like it's quite weird for professional qualification to say you're allowed to fail like up to 2 times a particular exam, and you know they have like a whole ladder thing where I did my grad scheme where you had to get to a certain point by a certain number of sittings because they expect you to fail. So that's kind of like a bit of a culture shock but you know. And the question, Emma, you asked is how long does it take? If you're absolutely flying through, you could do them in about 5 years, 6 years. I'll be honest, I know loads of people that I was working with in my company who are still going in their 30s. It's not so common, but it's like it has happened. But you can do in 5-6 years.
In other words, if you are embarking upon this career pathway, you're climbing Mount Everest, really. But
you are working while you're doing it, so it's not like you are earning and working. You just have to get to the stage where all your friends will stop doing exams.
What's your least favorite part about like being in the office and actually doing the job as opposed to the exam?
Well, except for sometimes I have no idea what I'm doing. I can't really think of something. It's a good. I enjoy it. I know it's a really annoying question because you want me to come up with something juicy.
Yeah.
I quite enjoy it.
Cheers. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Any other questions?
I've got one for Gideon.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank everyone. It's been really enjoyable. Gideon,
I echo that. Well done, guys.
How important would you say fluency with numeracy, i.e. being good with numbers, how important would you say that is for consultancy?
Hi. I don't think it's that important, to be honest. I think there's a lot more. I think problem solving generally is much more of a kind of favorable skill set to have, or just being kind of curious and kind of asking the right questions. I mean, of course, there are some areas, especially if you kind of specialize in financial services, it's a good thing to have. But if I think of my day job, you know, it's good to have a good basic foundation of Excel and things like that. But no, I don't think you need a basic, you know, financial background at all. No.
Thank you. Yeah.
Lovely. Anyone else? Next question. I've got a few questions that I would like to throw in. Gideon, seeing as you're on the screen, I'd like to ask you one first of all. People say about consultants that they wade into industries, they go into businesses, they cause havoc, throwing things up in the air, and then walk away, leaving that poor business to pick up the pieces after them. In other words, they cause a few problems. Is there any truth to that?
I'm sure there is some truth to that. I think it's when you kind of turn up at a client site. So typically you'll get two very different types of stakeholders. You'll have one which are, it's great to have you on board, with really kind of lack some resources, really good to help you, you know, to drive some momentum and rigor and governance around kind of what we need to do and drive momentum. You'll have other stakeholders which is like, you know, don't come into our culture and tell us what we're doing wrong. So I think the most important thing as a consultant is to be a very good listener, be very culturally aware, understand that different kind of clients and industries you go into, they will have very different cultures. So for example, working at the Royal Navy will have a very different culture than working in a night, you know, an HR department somewhere, you know, for a fashion brand. I mean, so you've got to be very, very culturally aware, ask the right questions. I'd also say it's very important, you know, they have brought you in for a reason. So it's important to provide healthy challenge, but doing it respectfully and bringing alternative points of view effectively. The number one objective of going into a client is to don't let them think that you are it's them and us culture. Try and bring yourselves on the same team, and we often do that by having kind of collaborating upfront and buying into some kind of collective shared values, design principles. And when we're all on that and we have kind of agreed on a governance approach, then typically things work out a bit better.
Lovely, thank you. Can I ask our lawyers on the call, Efrat and Natalie? Some of the students may have heard about the new pathway to qualification, the SQE, the Solicitors Qualifying Exam. Have either of you come across that, and do you have any views about the relativities to the traditional GDL and LPC approach?
I know the SQE is coming in, but that's probably as much as I know. I'm literally no expert in recruitment or the pathway. I've heard there's 2 exams and you do training in between, but I'm no expert in it. And there's also another route into law now, the route for apprenticeships.
Yeah, I think the whole sort of ethos of law is to try and open it out a little more to increase diversity, increase opportunity, and have sort of non-graduate pathways, and also places where you can effectively undertake a training contract that are not necessarily a professional firm of solicitors.
Yeah, I think, is it QWE, so qualifying work experience?
Yeah, exactly.
So for instance, if you work as a paralegal for 2 years instead of being a trainee, that might count towards it.
Might be a route, exactly.
So that might be a route. So I mean, it'll probably open up law and there'll be a lot more lawyers. I don't think it'll increase diversity, because from what I've heard, it's still very expensive, probably still around the £10,000 mark. So unless they've got more bursaries, then I doubt that will increase diversity.
And effectively, from an employer's perspective, in other words, the firms, do you think they will have a perspective? I'm going to use some sort of pretty emotive language now, but, you know, snob value. Do you think they will recognize more favorably people who've come through the traditional route or the new route, or or you, no particular view, either of you, both of you?
No particular view, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, my firm also hires legal executives, and they can be quite snobby. Certain firms can be quite snobby towards them. So I think it just depends on the firm. It depends what you want to do.
Yeah.
But as SQE is coming in, it's probably a good route to take because that's the future.
Yes. And Natalie, any other thoughts?
I don't really have any strong views on it. I've not paid it much attention, and my understanding is that it replaces the GDL and LPC. So I don't
over
think
time. I think they're running in parallel for a few years, and then they are going to be phasing out, as you say, the GDL and the LPC approach.
I think not until 2032.
Yeah, so it's running in parallel from exactly.
I don't know enough about the SQE course to comment. I assume that, I mean, the LPC is a very it's a great course. Like it does prepare you. It's very practical. But I assume that the new system will be just as good. I do wonder if like the legal knowledge that you get on the GDL will be the same if it's more focused on practice, because it is good to have that sometimes. But I don't have any strong views, and it is what it is. I'm sure they'll be well trained. I mean, to be honest, you don't really know what you're doing until like you're more than 2 years qualified afterwards anyway. So it does make a huge difference.
Interesting. I mean, you know, we've had a number of students ask us which pathway we would recommend for them to go through, and like you say, it's very hard to recommend. Because the new pathway, the SQE, is just about to be launched. It hasn't actually happened yet, but it all depends on what employers like, and it's untested at the moment. It's unknown. We have a view that potentially there will be those firms that prefer to stick to the traditional. They feel it's slightly more elevated, perhaps. I don't know, but we don't know yet, and it doesn't sound like anyone's got any particular views on it so far. So okay, thank you. Question for Daniel. If you're there, Daniel, you made reference to sort of thinking about sort of, you know, all the diverse types of careers that people can go into as accountants when they've qualified. You know, knowing accountants as you do and knowing your own thoughts about it, do you want to just sort of share your thoughts as to sort of the sort of pathways people can consider after they've qualified as an accountant?
So after qualifying, you can either, I'd say there's 3 or 4 main pathways, just 3, the main ones. You can either stick in audit, carry on auditing, being bored a lot of the time, if I'm going to be honest. It's great for those 3 years when you're doing it at the start, but not many people I know have stayed in it. It's very samey, but it's a very good thing to start off with, because you're learning maybe where you want to be after. So by working on lots of different industries, you know what industry you might want to work in after. So you could either stay in that, you could go accounts only, which very few people do, or you could go into industry, which would be working internally as a management accountant, as a financial reporting accountant, which financial reporting accountants like auditors, because we've been working and we know where things need to go and we know a lot of that. Or there's internal audit, which working internally in other companies doing their stuff. There's lots of different options, but I think majority of people do go into industry and work as maybe an FC, financial controller, management accountant, reporting accountant. That's where a majority of people would end up.
Lovely, thank you. A question for all of you. How important do you think work experience and internships are in terms of gaining experience, thinking about your pathways? I ask because obviously the simple answer is very important, but we're living in times that make it perhaps a little harder to access such opportunity because of what's happened over the past year and everything. Gideon, I can see you've taken yourself off mute, so I'm going to ask you first of all for your thoughts on that.
It's a good question. The truth is, because I didn't go to university, it's a little difficult because I mean, I did some, you know, like work experiences at school, but nothing kind of significant note. I'd say, you know, when people have kind of gone through the process, my biggest piece of advice would be, if you have an opportunity, go grab it. Because I think, you know, one thing I've learned throughout my career is that sometimes you don't know what you don't like until you've done it. and sometimes you grab an opportunity and you don't know where it leads. So I'd be always a big fan, if you have an opportunity, take advantage, and you never know what happens. Obviously, you've got to kind of manage, what you might have a better alternative. But if you're not going to do, if you've got an opportunity to kind of learn something new, work for organization which you can kind of get really credible experience, I'd say go grab it.
Thank you. Anyone else got anything to add to that?
I would have said, like, the typical, it's very important, but I mean, I'm someone who had 0 work experience and I still got the job. So it would be a bit hypocritical for me to say that. But I mean, like, in my heart, I want to say it's important, but clearly you can't go without it.
And if you aren't able to get work experience, what would be the best way of pursuing the pathway then?
For actuarial specifically?
In your case, yes.
Apply for 100, get 1 if you're lucky, basically. I mean, that's what I did. I literally applied, got rejected, but just took 1.
I would say one other thing, sorry to interrupt, is my first day at my apprenticeship, I was told by the partner to develop your LinkedIn network, set up an account and develop your LinkedIn. And I mean, it's the way I've found my new roles was via LinkedIn. So it's an amazing a resource to, interacting with kind of recruiters in the industries that you're interested in, and they kind of work above and beyond. Of course, sometimes, there's some better than others, but they really kind of work hard to kind of get good opportunities, and it only takes 1. So I'd say kind of build your network on LinkedIn within the community, and leverage kind of any relationships you have already.
Yeah, we're a great lot at networking. That is for absolute certainty. So I would say that's very good advice. Talking to my 2 lawyers that we have tonight, some people are fortunate enough to get great training contracts and their employer pays for them to take their professional exams. In other cases, that's not necessarily so. What are your views about people who have to fund their own GDL and LPC, and the risks of that and versus the opportunity of that? Do you think it's a wise pathway for people to consider?
It's an expensive risk to take. A lot of people from my LPC didn't become lawyers, so they spent all that money and they're doing different things. I suppose having the LPC as a professional qualification probably stood them in good stead. But if you think that they then did the GDL as well, if they didn't do a law course, I mean, you're talking, well, at least back then you were talking, I don't know, depending on what city you're doing it, you're talking around £20,000 to £25,000 plus living expenses of not working for a year. It's incredibly expensive. It's a huge risk. What can I say? It just depends. I mean, you could always take a job afterwards and just keep trying, but there's absolutely no guarantee that you will get a return on that investment. Everyone I know that didn't end up being a lawyer is doing very well and quite happy with, well, mostly doing very well and happy with what they're doing. There's no way around it. If you don't have someone to fund it, then you take the risk.
Efra, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think you just have to be realistic. I think you need to take a good look at yourself and think, do I actually want to do this? Because if you're umming and ahhing and just doing the LPC just because that's what people do, then should you really be doing that? So I think people just need to focus and decide what they want to do. I mean, a lot of people from my LPC self-funded, and trying to think. Some of them qualified, some of them are just professional paralegals, some of them are just review contracts in-house. I mean, there are other legal routes that the LPC does help with as well. So that's important to bear in mind. But I mean, everyone talks about getting a training contract and qualifying. It's not the be all and end all. There's other things out there that are also legal related.
Lovely. Thank you very, very much, both of you. So we have time if anyone has one final question. Are there any more questions from any of our delegates tonight?
I've got one final one.
Go ahead.
It's been mentioned by like a few, like the professionals that you've had like rejections and changed from like different firms. I was wondering how like you managed to get over those rejections and sort of like, yeah, how to deal with it.
Great question. I'm going to I'm going to ask someone, whoever feels they've been rejected a lot and would be happy to share their views on that.
I mean, I've been rejected.
Oh,
yeah.
either of you, yes.
Both lawyers.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had, I mean, I did loads of applications. My A levels weren't, you know, straight A's. They weren't as you need for magic circles, but I still applied, and obviously they just shoved my application straight in the bin. I mean, that you can't take it to heart. You can't let it put you down, even though it's easier to say than to do. But every rejection is a step closer to getting a training contract. So you just have to bear that in mind.
Great response. Thank you, Natalie.
I would agree. It was so long ago, I couldn't even tell you which firms I applied to for a training contract. I can tell you that the second firm I ended up working at after I'd qualified, I applied to for a training contract and they didn't even acknowledge me. And then like, I'd already forgotten about it 2 years later, and I was looking through my emails and thought, oh, I applied to them. And then I can tell you that a few years later, when I applied for another job, they rejected me and I ended up staying where I was. And a couple months later, I took one of their big clients. They came to me and it wasn't on purpose. It's funny how things work. So you won't take it to heart. It's fine. What's meant to be will be, and you end up where you're meant to be.
Yeah, I think it, as Efrat said, it's a lot easier, and you both have said it's a lot easier to say than to do. But if you can adopt that attitude, you know, and not take it personally, and it's just a process, and that process, the more you put into it, the more that will come out of it at the end, without a shadow of doubt.
The other thing, maybe if I could just add is,
please do, Sammy.
I mean, firstly, just to echo those sentiments, like I remember once I applied for a job and I got rejected before I even pressed send. And it was that kind of point that I realized that some of these are just automated things that, you know, it is what it is, and I didn't take it to heart from. But from your second job onwards, you don't go through these grad scheme kind of processes, but you don't have assessment centers. This is kind of like a one-time thing where you just got to, in the nicest way, I mean, I had to do it, suck it up, and just like you'll get it eventually, you'll get it. And then from that point onwards, it's a different ball game. Like when I applied for my other job, I just put in an application, had an interview, and, you know, either got it or didn't. I didn't have to start doing online tests and assessment centers and phone interview. Like, you just don't have that anymore. So like it's just once you have to go through this.
Yeah, so persevere, go through the pain, cope with it, and you do come out to a better place on the other side, I think is what I'm hearing, which is good. I'm conscious of time. It is now 7 o'clock, and I don't want to keep anyone any longer than the hour that this was scheduled for. I want to thank everyone on the call tonight. I'd like to thank all the delegates who joined. To you, our delegates, there is more help at Work Avenue. If you want to speak to an advisor, if you want to talk to any of our advisors, my team of careers advisors are all professional, they're all qualified, they're all experienced, they all know what they're talking about. And we have a whole network of people that you can talk to as well. So if you have any questions, please just be in touch with us. You know where to find us. You've had enough communication from us. You know exactly where to find us. All our services are free, so it won't cost you a penny. And you have plenty to gain from doing so. So do please, you know, be in touch if we can be any assistance at all with any of your employability. To our professionals who've joined tonight, you know, to Daniel, to Gideon, to Efrat, Sammy and Natalie, to all of you, I really thank you for taking your times out tonight. Your advice has been so sound, so interesting, and delivered so warmly and so humbly as well, you know, warts and all, about the things that have gone well and some of the things that haven't as well. It's been really inspirational to hear from all of you about your own career paths. And I hope, you know, I speak for everyone when I say so as well. So thank you all. There are other graduate events scheduled every Tuesday, every Thursday throughout this month. If you want to consider other career pathways, just sign up for any of the other evenings. It's all on our website and on our social media as well. Thank you all and have a good evening, everyone. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys. Great session.